Michelle has an interesting presentation today along the lines of that video that we shared, that she shared with me and I shared with you. Storyteller, soul care. And Michelle has titled hers, what did you tell me?
Filling your tank.
Filling your tank.
Because we're talking about gas prices. Filling your tank.
Yeah, filling your tank. Okay.
So the video was done by Alan Arnold, and he's an industry professional. He's been in the writing realm for a long time. He was an acquisitions editor for a big company, had put out some pretty big name authors over the years. And I've seen him live at several different writers' conferences here on the West Coast. Phenomenal man. But he realized at some point that he was doing and performing in order to get God's pleasure. And he turned it around and started looking at it again. And I recently read his book, which I highly recommend. I'm putting the link to it in the chat. The Story of With. And it's for all creatives. And that's one thing that's going to be a little bit different about today. It's for the artists and the musicians and the chefs and the quilters and the sewers and anybody who has creativity, because God created us to be creative. We are in his image, and that's the first way that he introduced himself, was as a creator God when he created in Genesis, and how we can model our creation and our creativity after the way he did it in Genesis. And that's what the video talked about a lot. This book, I am one who, I don't like being in charge of anything. I'm a really good worker bee. Tell me what you need and I'm happy to help. Don't put me in charge. Don't hand me the microphone. Don't make me the lead teacher. I don't like being in this position. I'd rather be in the background. But this book inspired me to take a proposal to my elders at my church to start a new ministry for creatives, because it was incredible to me. The book is divided into 3 sections. It's got a nonfiction, introduction part to it. And then at the end, it has another nonfiction part. But in the middle is an allegory that's written in story about this young girl who wants to become a chef, and how she feels locked into, making cookie cutter, recipes from for a manufacturer rather than creating something. And at the end of this journey that she's on and all these steps that she goes through, she finds that she needs to stay expectant. And that's one of the things that when I first started writing, I was very late to coming to writing. And I was a late bloomer as far as reading went. I was never taught phonics until I was a teacher and had to teach phonics. I went, oh, there's rules to this. I went through that whole generation, a whole language where I had no phonics at all. I didn't know. So my spelling is still to this day atrocious. Sometimes so bad my computer goes, okay, I can't help you with that. I have no idea what you're trying to spell. So I have gotten to the point where if that happens to me, I'll speak it into a text to my mother, and then it will type it out right because of the way I said it. And then I can go and type it right. And then if I accidentally hit send, my mom knows that, oh, that must be Michelle trying to figure out how to spell something. So I haven't done that yet. She hasn't gotten anything yet, but I have warned her that if some random word comes through, that's what's going on. But that idea of being expectant, in Alan's book, he talks about it as being like waiting as a surfer, waiting for that right wave. Lots of waves will come by, but where's that right wave that you can ride in and just be a beautiful trip? Or getting on a wild stallion that's taking you on a journey and you really have no control over it. When I first started writing, I always viewed it as a roller coaster. It's like, I have no idea where we're going on this. I'm strapped in. Okay, we're doing loop-de-loops. We're going up to climb. We're dropping. Okay, let's go, God. But that idea of coming expectant with, and the whole point of the book is we're not creating our arts, our drawings, our music, our writing for God. We're doing it with God. And so that idea of, okay, what do you want me to create today? How do you want me to draw this character today? What colors do you want me to add? What descriptions do you want me to add in my writing? I'm here, God, I'm listening. Let's go with this. And being that expectant kind of thing. The other one is to pursue it with an awakened heart. So being centered on God and knowing your heart and knowing what God wants you to do, knowing that you've been created of creative. And we think, we see the spiritual gifts. There's preaching and there's teaching and there's, hospitality and there's all the spiritual gifts. But creativity is one also. And we see that in Exodus when God calls out the two people who are going to lead the creation of the tabernacle, which was a beautiful piece of art. It had embroidery, and it had weaving, and it had metal work to it. And there was Bezalel and Oholeb, which I'm probably saying those names wrong, who he said were, these are craftsmen, and they're to find the ones who have special skill in these arts. So that is us. He honors those who are creatives, whatever our art form is. And he wants us to take our skill and use it to bless the whole body. I write fantasy. I write crazy out there stories, but mine are all Christian based. And I know there's some people, some of my readers, who will never step foot in a church, but they will hear the message from my characters. They will hear that salvation story there. And I'm very purposeful about being very deliberate in my storytelling with that, because I know there's so many people, with Harry Potter out there and all the, Marvel movies. There's a ton of push for fantasy and, and out there stuff. But mine has a message to it. So having that engaged heart and knowing this is where God, I am a massive introvert, and I know most writers are. When I take those little tests, I'm not like, 65, 75% introverted. I'm like 95%. It's like, whoa, way over there on the side. So this is how I interact with people. This is my evangelism. This is where I get my writing out through that. And then he talks about, there's one scene that just, it really, I had to stop reading after that chapter and just sit on it for a few days. He talks about our sins being like a desert full of quicksand, that the more we struggle and more we try to do it ourselves and get out of it, the more mired we get in them, and how we need God's help to get us out. And those scars that we get from those times, whether it's our own sins or sins of other people that inflicted scars on us, he talks about that Japanese idea of, and I can't ever say the word, it's like kensing, where they take broken pottery and they fill in the cracks and mend it back together with gold. So it's more beautiful broken than it was whole. And how when our scars and our injuries and the junk in our life has been redeemed by God, then we can turn it around and use it someplace else. And God will use those broken places, that gold shining through those cracks, to help us reach others and tell their stories. And then the last one is to take the journey with the Father. Yeah, John. Oh, you're just waving a cat. Definitely.
I was just waving a cat.
Sorry, that you're trying to get my attention. So again, that idea of it's not necessary. Yes, our art is for God first, and then for the wider community that we want to serve as our ministry. But it's with God. That's getting up in the morning and say, okay, God, what do you want me to create today? Where do you want me to take my story? Where do you want me to take art today? The video that was up, and hopefully you've had a chance to watch it, is more about us taking care of ourselves. And any of us who have ever been caregivers for an elderly parent or a sick child or an injured dog or whatever, we know that if we don't keep ourselves in good health, in good mental state, in good restfulness, then we cannot effectively help anyone else. And so one of his lines is, the art of living well precedes creating well. And so we have got to keep our own tanks filled up, and we have got to remember that we can't create out of stress. We can't create out of emptiness. If we don't have anything within ourselves, we can't draw from God and fill up our stories, our art, our music to go forward. Um, and he talked about in the video, we're not in Eden anymore. We face challenges every day. So we have to find ways to fill ourselves up. And of course, that's obviously being in the Word, being connected to Him so that we can do that creation with Him. But then for each of us, there's going to be other ways that we find to fill ourselves up. I'm sure for, some of our people, that's running. Okay. No, that would not fill me up in the slightest. I'm not a runner. No, please don't make me do that. Unless there's some crazy critter chasing me. No. But I love a good walk out in the nature. I love to go to new places and travel and see different things. That inspires me. That will fill my well up so I can turn around. And that also gives me, if I've seen lots of different things, if I've seen creation, if I've been out in it and I've smelled it and touched it, then I can create better scenes in my stories because I've been in it. I've seen it. Some of you that will be playing with your grandkids. Some of you that's your pets. Some of you, that's hanging out with your spouse, that you have such a close relationship with. So we want to stay connected. He has 4 examples coming out of Genesis, and you probably heard these, that when God created in Genesis, He spoke it. So He used words, which most of us here are wordsmiths. So He used His words, but He had to imagine it first. So God has an imagination. I mean, look at the platypus. I mean, he's got a crazy imagination. Or the giraffe. Okay, it's like, yeah, let's make a whole long neck on this thing. Let's put a bill on something that's furry with a flat tail. Okay, this is good. So he's got an imagination, and we are gifted with that imagination. He spoke in a unique voice. And each of us, whether we're doing art or music or writing, we each have our own unique voice. Most of us, if we all opened up, a page in each of our books, it would sound different. Even though Shamrit and I write fantasy, it's going to sound different between the two of us. So we've got our own unique voice that God created within us, and to use that. And then the rest. Now, He didn't rest because He was tired. We typically do rest because we're tired. And we need that. We need that time off. And some writers I know set up schedules so they write, and not on the weekends, or they won't answer any emails, or they won't engage with their social media on the weekends, to give themselves a break from those kind of things, to, again, give time to fill their well again, to fill their tank so that they have something to go from there. But God rested to look at it and say, that's good. And we are us creatives, we are hypercritical of ourselves. It's like, oh, well, I could have done that better. I could have made that tighter. Probably could have made that a different color on that art. Oh, I hit that note wrong. We are hypercritical of ourselves. But when the project is finished and done, we should still take time to say, that was well done. I did my best on that. And I'm going to celebrate the launch of the book. I'm going to celebrate the release of the art. I'm going to celebrate the musical performance that was done, and say it was good. And thank you, God, for letting me do it, and rest in that rather than tearing it all apart. There's a time for editing. There's a time for tweaking and tearing apart, but there's a time to rest in and say, it's good. It's done. Let's rest there. And then, that whole idea of just savoring that moment. We have a lot of false comforters, and he talks about a lot of those. Staying busy. We have and that's typical of authors. It's like, okay, that book just came launched. Okay, what projects am I working on next? I got to get this going. I got to right. I got to get so many words in today because I got to get this out by. There's no time for God to write with God, to be inspired by God, to enjoy that. And there's a lot of different ways that you can approach writing rather than formulaic of, I have to do this many words, or I have to do a scene, or I have to. I frustrate a lot of writer people that I know because I actually write fairly fast, even though I read really slow. And I can put out easily, I can write 3 to 4 books in a year without too much problem. And that's not going over them and editing them and, you know, getting published and all of that. That's just the initial first draft, get that out. But I do not write every day. I do not write on a schedule. I really, you know, if things are busy, things are stressful. Right now, dealing with the dog all the time, and I've got a friend who's got a workshop, retreat that's coming up. There's 2 retreats in California this year, one in Southern California in June, and one in Mount Herman in the Santa Cruz area in November, that are coming up. And they're for this. They're for creatives to find rest and rejuvenation and be ready to go back and write afresh again. That refreshing soul. And so, but I'm building her website and making her registration forms. And so, you know, it's like, okay, writing's not on the forefront right at the moment, and that's okay. And I don't beat myself up about that. I try to find a rhythm, you know, and to go with that. So I just want to open it up a little bit to see what things are your, you know, being too busy, or some of the things he talked about, measuring the wrong things, the word count, you know, how many books you get out in a year, putting pressure on your art so you validate you. You know, if I don't get enough likes on my book right away, if I don't get any reviews right away, then I haven't done a good job. You know, my validation is that I created the story that God created me to create, and whoever's going to read it is going to read it. I mean, I'd love to have reviews, but I can't get people to review it. You know, there's some things I can't do. Looking for relief in the wrong ways, you know, binging on Netflix, eating a tub of ice cream, too much, you know, of any one thing, you know, when you're depressed. Oh, somebody give me a 1-star review. Where's the ice cream? You know, that kind of thing. But that's not what we're looking for. So what are some of, so we're just going to open it up. What are some of the things that you find that can distract you from being creative, or some of the things that you find that will inspire you to be more creative? So, Kathleen.
Right now, I think from like January on at work, it's been so busy that I've worked sometimes till 11:30 at night. So it's been very stressful for me, and I haven't been able to dedicate myself the way that I want to, because I need to get this finished. You know, at Kim, when we talked, or even Nancy and you know, I just need to get this, you know, edited and finished. And I put so much pressure on myself. I feel like I'm being pulled in so many different directions, whether it's family, you know, I'm trying to get the work done, you know, because that's my job. So I have to get that done. And then, you know, with the kids, all of a sudden, everybody wants a piece of you on the weekend. And, but I find every day I try to get out and have a walk, because if I, you know, I'm up in the woods and I just need that time. And very first thing in the morning, I start my morning opening my Bible. No matter what's pressing, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because that's going to start my day and set my day. So even though I'm feeling very pressured, I'm trying to, you know, look to God and try, like you said, to refresh myself during the day.
Yeah.
Because it can become so stressful. And what you said, we put so much pressure on ourselves. I'm the worst at it. So
I think all of us writers are. I think because it's not like an office job where I have this project that has this deadline, you know, and I can see an end to it. We're writing this book and it's like, okay, well, I need to go back and rewrite and tweak that. And, oh, I went to a conference and learned this, and I'm going to work on that aspect of it. And, you know, we keep fussing with it and messing with it, and it's like, release it, but it's not done. We got the next book behind that, you know, to come up with the next one. So I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And because most of us do this in isolation, you know, even, you know, our art, you know, or music, sometimes you'll create music with somebody else, but a lot of times you're doing it on your own too, you know. And so we don't have that feedback of working with a team, or, you know, that benefit of a set structure. We're kind of really freeform on our own, so we put a lot on ourselves.
I know that for me, there are a couple of things that I would like to say. One is that I get the most stressed when I begin to, what I call in my own mind, step into the world of man, which I equate with the internet. Quite frankly, I equate with the internet. I mean, that's an easy way out. But you know, I'm out by 6 o'clock in the morning looking at the morning star and doing this, and also running with the dogs later on in the afternoon. So that helps me because I live in nature and I'm inspired. But when I compare myself to others and where everybody else is, we're all on our own paths. I mean, I'm on my own path, and I don't want to be held up in comparison for someone else to say she does this and I don't do that. You know,
Right.
We're really on our own journey, and that took me time to figure out and time to fall into that there would be a rhythm and I will be taken care of and I'll figure it out, kind of thing. You know, but that was hard for me because, you know, coming from being such an overachiever, you know, and that's what you're talking about, Michelle. You're talking about the push that we have on ourselves, you know, that we'll achieve what we're supposed to achieve, you know. And talking to Maury over the last couple of weeks, I could never write the kind of book Maury's writing, but I respect it, highly respect it. It's a wonderful book. And, you know, so everybody's got their own path, you know. I think that's, you know, but it's hard. You're right.
Yeah, we're all meant to reach a different audience. You know, who I'm talking to, my fantasy people, aren't going to be the same people that Nancy reaches with her great devotionals or her, you know, contemporary story about the old woman. We're not hitting the same people, but we're sharing the same message of, you know, redemption and God's love and God's choosing you. You know, so those are all part of that. But we each pick something else. One thing that I figured out pretty early on is, being that this is an art form, whether it's writing or painting or music, if all of us walked into a museum and looked at different paintings on the wall, we are all going to like the same painting, the same piece of sculpture. Some of us are going to look at the modern and go, yuck, I could have done that. I could have thrown splashed, you know, paint on it. Like, I could have drawn a dot. I don't get this. And others of us are going to look at the old classics and go, oh, yeah, that's old dusty stuff. Yeah, whatever. So it's the same with our books. It's the same with our art. We're going to strike with some people and they're going to love us. They're going to be our super fans. And others are going to go, yeah, you're just not my cup of tea. Great. I'm sure I can point you to a whole bunch of other authors here. Let me see if I can connect you with who would be your, you know, favorite author. Yeah, John.
I'll speak now. I'm more of a parasite, I think. I'm not an artist per se. I consider myself more of a copy machine. I kind of feed off everybody else's creativity, and I put something together from that. So I don't really create per se. I just work with everyone else to create what they want or what they see. I kind of put it together. So it's kind of a different way to look at it, I guess.
I'm sorry, but I could not put together what you put together. You do art.
Yeah. But you fed all that information to me.
Art, but
right,
but
you
all that
have
information to me,
created.
Michelle.
Yeah.
So.
You have to create what we're thinking. So you are creating.
Yeah.
You're taking our vision, and you know,
Right.
because you can't see in our head. So you're taking the vision and you're creating what you think that.
Yeah, you're supplying me with all the ideas.
It's imagination.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, John. I see you as a vision merchant. That's the term I would coin for you, because you make the visions real. You make them
visible.
alive.
That's all. That's
you
all.
Sell
Without
the vision
all your
Hey,
input.
that is not that's all.
No.
If I could, I'm a musician and I've composed about 10 songs in my life, but very, very, very little of my public performance. Once has it been my music. Am I therefore not a creative? I'm also really good at accompanying a singer or a soloist, instrumental, doesn't matter, and following them where they go at their speed. In fact, we kind of tease the guitarist in charge of our music team at church right now because he goes where the Spirit leads, and we're really good at following. That does not mean I'm not a creative. You being able to take the vision from our head and transfer it, that's a real skill. It's an extraordinary one. We could not do it without you. And just because you're not composing new music doesn't mean you're not a musician. And because you're not composing new art does not make you not an artist.
Yeah, and also, you know, when in college, when my professor said to me at 17, 18, you know, you should be a writer, I thought, why would I do that? It comes so easily to me. You know, this is nothing that anybody could make a living at, and I'm not, it's so easy and I love it. So therefore, somehow in my raising, I'll blame my parents for this. You know, it's got to be work or something in order for it to be valid or something. Well, you know, there's a great joy in work. So, you know, you're, you know, because you can do it so well, John, you know,
yes,
that's where it seems like it's kind of nothing or something, or that's been my experience anyway. So,
oh, that is so true, Kim.
I guess I got everybody fooled then, so I can charge more now, right?
Well, it's like if somebody gives you a whole pile, like I have a friend who collects rocks and shells, you know, okay, they were provided for her. She picked them up off the beach or wherever, but the things she makes with them, no, she didn't create that rock or shell, but the things she does with them, that's kind of like you.
Yeah.
And like what Sherry said, as a musician as well, I might be handed, let's say, a chord chart. And no, I didn't create that song. And no, I didn't lay out those chords, but how I interpret them and express them on my instrument is going to be different than somebody else. So and I love that because when it is just a chord chart, you get to be very creative. You know, I learned as a reader, but I really like to just have the fun of the improvisation off a chord chart and just let me do what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, we might be given some of the pieces, but we can still do something with it.
Yeah. John, you take pieces, but what you deliver back is something unique that was never there before. That's creation. That is absolutely creation.
So no more of that crazy talk.
Yeah, we showed you, John.
I don't
We say you're creative, so hush up.
Okay, all right, I surrender.
If I could draw sloths the way you do after you didn't even know they were real, I would be over the moon.
Yes.
That was really cool.
Right. It's hard to rest though. You know, it's hard to rest, so, or to balance. When I got very, very sick with this stuff I have years ago, you know, I'm a workaholic. And I love work and I love doing things and you know, right now I look at my yard that's full of leaves because I keep the little leaves down so the little bugs can last in Missouri over the winter and all this kind of stuff that we're supposed to do. So I've got huge amounts of leaves to do. And I think, oh boy, part of me thinks, oh geez, I got so much to do. I don't want to get out there. But you know, there's a wash in getting out there at work because there's work there. I can get out there and love the yard and all that kind of stuff. And you know, there's just there's balance. There has to be balance somehow in there in order to rejuvenate. You're absolutely right, Michelle. His book sounds very interesting to me. I'm so glad you did this. I'm so glad you did this. I needed this today.
I think
I'll need
like most of you, I like to go out in nature and walk every day, and that's very inspiring. It's also restful. And so it's sort of two things. But the other thing I like to do to rest is just read somebody else. Maybe I'm in the mood for this book or that book, but just read somebody else and get lost into their world. You know, that's restful to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it helps me remember, especially as an editor, even in really, really good books, every once in a while I'll find something that they could have tweaked and then I let it go and I remember, oh yeah, they probably feel about their book the way I do about mine and they're never satisfied, but I am so glad they published anyway. That kind of thing really helps.
Yeah.
Don't you find creativity bleeds into other things? Like now, one of my new little projects is going to be, I'm going to try mosaics this
Mhm.
summer. I'm going to try to do them outside
Mhm.
and see if I can make any of them. And, you know, it's a different thing I haven't done before, but it bleeds to other areas in your life.
Yeah. When you allow yourself to step into that gifting that God has given you for creativity, it doesn't stop at just words. It doesn't stop at just art. You come up with unique ways to solve problems. You will pick up other. I do woodworking. I do card making. I do kind of cross stitch. I mean, there's a ton of little crafty things. I don't know how many of you seen the new diamond art, which is a paint by number thing with little tiny itty bitty beads. I've done a ton of those because they're very relaxing, and I can mindlessly do that, and my mind goes crazy, and I'm writing on stories, and I'm working on scenes that aren't fleshed out right, and playing with those, and so it's just totally mindless stuff that creates something new that I can put up on my wall, as art or give away as a gift. But it allows my my brain to rest and not force the creativity to come.
You're not good at all that. I go to the backwoods because my voice is terrible. When I used to have to sing for when doing worship, when leading worship, I'd have to sing, and I would be like, my congregation, I would be like, cover your ears, kind of. It wasn't that bad, but I go to the backwoods and walk with Hayden, and I sing, and so something you're not even good at, but it's a different kind of venue to get your soul kind of going or something. Do you guys do that? This is true confessions time, I guess. It's time for me.
Yeah, I crank up the radio in the car and belt it out there where nobody has to listen to me.
Yeah, I know that kind of thing is actually really good for your mental health. You want to be doing things where there is no right and wrong, there's no winning or losing or doing it badly or well. That sense of play, if you will, that if we don't have that in our life, it starts to mess with us emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, I I make jewelry, and my favorite part of that is when I do fold forming. And fold forming, you have to heat the metal until it softens it. Copper, brass, and then you beat on it with a hammer. But the thing is that the metal is plastic. And the different ways you hit it with the hammer, it moves in different ways and creates different forms and curves in different ways, as it thins in some areas and doesn't in others. And I mean, for me, that is really, really relaxing, but I think it also gets out inner aggressions or whatever. But I don't know, because you're forming and creating, and I think that's a lot like what God does with us. And so because of that, it just, I don't know, I find some kind of homeostasis or something. I get into a more of a mellow place after I've created something where I've formed metal. I mean, I've made metal flowers and leaves, and by hammering, and it's just really, really relaxing for me.
Yeah. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to drop a link in our chat. Alan also has a blog, and you can check it out. He's got great stuff to help for, filling your soul, but you can also get on his newsletter, and he will email you some kind of encouragement, some kind of highlight. He did have the story of with Facebook group, but he just closed it down and he's sending everybody to his blog and his email now to kind of tone down his time on social media. So he's doing it this way. But connect with him and his stuff. Oops, there it goes. So there it is. So you can connect with Alan Arnold that way and continue to find ways to fill yourself up. He, like Nancy said, he recommends reading for pleasure, not to say, how does this author do their scenes? I want to do it like that. Not that, but to just read for pleasure, just, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whether it's in your genre or not, just to read, just to let your brain go and enjoy something else like that. So. You want to end this up, Nancy?
I was going to say everybody really got into talking about the things that relax them or the things that they can do that. But another thing that you'd asked was the things that are a problem for you or distract you, and not very many people talked about that. Yeah, my own brain distracts me. I'll get like a ping pong ball, and my brain will just be going everywhere. I'll be thinking of all these things that I need to do. There's always more to do than there is of me, and sometimes I get really feel really stretched out of shape.
Yeah.
But I'll find myself bouncing from thing to thing throughout a day, and then I get to the end of the day and realize, I really haven't gotten to the things I really want to do. And so that's probably my biggest problem.
Yeah.
So, and a month can go by like that, so it doesn't help that I live with my daughter, who's also chronically ill, and her husband, because I'll find myself trying to do things to help her, or things that she needed to do, like with the garden and stuff, where she can't do it, and then I end up going out and doing it. And so between that and then I've got 5 daughters, so, and a bunch of grandkids, and I try and stay. My family is always, you too, huh? My family, so yeah. My family, when I grew up, my family was always very dysfunctional and very, nobody ever talked to each other or called each other, or, once we grew up and went out on our own, it's like we all went and lived our separate lives and nobody ever talked to anybody else. It's gotten better now, but that's something I did not want to happen in my family. So I always try and call my 5 girls at least once a week.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That can take up a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. When I was teaching and I had summers off, I would always give myself a week or 2 of, no responsibilities, no have to do's kind of thing, just to get myself into, a more relaxed state. And then I would make myself a list of, okay, because I'm more of an afternoon writer. I am not a morning person. I don't function in mornings at all. If I can get out of the house with matching shoes on, it's a good day. I just can't think well in the morning. So I do most of my writing, late in the afternoon, evenings. And so it was like, okay, between the time I get up and, noon or 1, this is my project. I'm cleaning the kitchen, or I'm, paying bills, or I'm working on this. And then after that point, it's whatever I want it to be. It's creating time, it's doing art, it's writing, it's editing, it's whatever I want, but I have no structure to it whatsoever. And that helped me out, kind of focusing on, getting some time done, but giving myself some leeway time too.
I know for me, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm just going to say, I'm not a morning person, but I like to be up. I just don't like to have to be doing something particular,
Yeah.
But by the afternoon, I'm ready to sit down and really focus, and that's when I write too. But I like my morning kind of free form. And but that's when I get a lot of ideas and inspiration, maybe from the things I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 7 kids still at home, and I started my writing when I only had 5. So it's not like the things that are distracting me from my creative stuff are unimportant. So it's like, okay, God, you're my boss. Yeah. And if I'm getting distracted by things that you don't think are important, please help me to prioritize what you want me to prioritize. But he is a very understanding boss. So if I don't do anything creative for a month because life happened and it's life that God cares about, then I don't stress it. Now, if I got sucked into social media and it's some kind of controversy, which can happen so easily, then it's like, okay, yes, Lord. So I try to let him and his priorities, because he's got the right balance and of push to create, because if I don't do it, who will? But also he prioritizes little kids as much as he does my book or more.
Yeah.
So that's where I go for my long term, but it's more a daily thing. Okay, God, what do you want me to do today?
Yeah, going in expectant, like Alan said.
I'm wondering, because this seems like that a lot of us women have chimed in. I'm wondering if what the men find distracting and what they, I mean, I know John, you talked a little bit, but I'm just wondering what your opinions are with this, because I know the male mind and female mind work so differently, So well, that's my belief anyway. I'm just wondering what.
Serious?
What?
I said, are you serious? You work differently? We think differently?
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Very much so. Oh, yeah, very much so. And I've been married 41 years. And but one of the things that I think I struggle with is figuring out the boundaries of what I own and what I don't own. And so, what the things that I'm responsible for that I can contribute, what God has called me to do, as compared to the other people's responsibilities, right? Like getting reviews on Amazon. That's not really my responsibility. My responsibility is to what God's called me to do, to write, to share the story that I've been given. And but so that can be a big distraction for me. I tend to be somebody who wants to solve problems, so that can very easily diminish creativity, I think. Because I've dealt with, throughout my years, I've dealt with this idea that, I'm trying to prove myself to God. God, won't you be so happy that you picked me to be on your team, kind of a thing, and thinking. And so that's hampered my creativity, and it's hampered my peace with God, the rest with God. Because all the striving, even if it was for God, when I was a pastor, was I'm doing all this stuff for God. Well, not really. I was doing it, to soothe my growing uneasiness in my life, right? And this hole that I had that I couldn't fill with performance. So those are things that I have to really work on to keep in check. So that for me, and then if I'm just going to take the mask off, it's when I can spend time with God and just be in the Word, but also I love to just sing to Him, not songs that other people have made up, just words that come into my own heart and mind. And I find those times of worship to be really connecting for me, but they're too far and too few between. So striving for those things is the daily battle. It really is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I know I'm not a man, but I had something to say to that. And it goes back to some of the problems, is that just this last week, I really had to go inside and deal with myself quite a bit to figure out exactly where some of my frustration and disappointment that was really bothering me and hindering me was coming from. And I spent a few days really soul searching and praying and thinking about that. And just like what Craig said, I realized that some of that wasn't my responsibility or up to me. I don't own that, and I don't need to worry about that. And I just don't need to spend my brain energy on that. And I came to a place where I sort of rethought and restructured how I'm going to think about those things, and just how I'm going to change how I think about those things really released me. And I just felt like it was God showing me and teaching me something that I was doing to hinder myself. And so, I mean, we can just get in that spot where we're maybe looking for certain things, or expecting certain things, or hoping certain things, and really it's just in the way, and not allowing us to just create. I love the idea that he says in the video about just inviting God to create with you. and just, you know, having him create with you. I love that idea. That was like the highlight of that video to me. But one other thing you touched on too, Michelle, and it's sort of like this is, you know, we all begin somewhere. And so I came to writing late too, and spelling was not my thing either. And I live with a dictionary right beside me or my iPad. And I wasn't a good reader early on. But you know, you put your first book out there and you've had it edited and you do your best job at the time. And then years later, you may go, man, I could have fixed that book. You know, I could have written that better now.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's an uncomfortable feeling because you know you've grown and learned things that if you'd known that you, gosh, I would have like rephrased that sentence. Well, that's one of those things, you know, just to let go. We don't really have control over that unless you want to go back and rewrite your book. But just yesterday, someone contacted me about that very first book I wrote. And I had this like feeling well up in me, like I should say, oh, that was my first book. I could have done it better if I wrote it now, maybe, you know, but I just went, don't do that, because it's like not accepting a compliment from somebody when they compliment you. Oh, this whole thing, or yeah, well, you know, it was my best at the time, and it was exactly me at the time, and I felt like it was exactly what I was supposed to do at the time. And as I've always said about music, and I say it now about books too, we do our very best and we do everything we can to make it our best, and then we put it out there and let God deal with it, and he can use it the way he wants to. If we just get out of the way. You know, I feel that was part of it for me. Just get out of the way. You know, do what you're supposed to do and get out of the way. So that was my revelation in the last week or two, where I just needed to do some soul searching and just rethink a few things about how I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Us creatives can be overthinkers too.
And you know, acceptance is such a big deal. I mean, you know, that's my revelation in the last 2 weeks is what I have situations that I don't want to accept that I have to accept. And then if I can accept it, that's a clearinghouse and go on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Maury, were you starting? Go ahead.
Well, I listened to the video and I've genuinely appreciated this discussion, and I appreciate what Kim said earlier. I would say that I think it was much easier for me to write what I've written than you fiction writers, because I you know, my book's about the Word of God. I've got the spiritual words that reflect the spiritual thoughts of the mind of Christ that's been in me, although I didn't engage with it for the first couple of decades the way I should have, but it's been in me now for over 50 years. And so as I wrote my book, I mean, Paul's talking, you know, talks about purposing to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. I mean, you know, Jesus says, if you abide in my word, you remain in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine. You know the truth, and truth will set you free. I'm writing about what I learned over the course of my journey to be the real meaning of, for example, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. And so I've got the book in front of me. I'm opening my mind and my heart to his voice, to the only one any of us should ever call teacher. And I don't believe I got too far off the reservation, because I always had these words in front of me that I needed to hold myself accountable to. And then I began to realize, for example, with the word knowledge, when I went into the Greek and I see Paul using the word gnosis in one case, and in an entirely different verse, he's using the word epignosis. And yet I'm reading it in the English, it's one word, knowledge. And I'm saying to myself, well, why did Paul use gnosis here and epignosis over here? And that motivated me to get deeper and to seek and to try to understand. Should I have a different understanding as a result of his use of the word epignosis in this verse, as opposed to the one gnosis in this verse? Or the word know. In one instance, it's oida in the Greek. In another instance, it's gnosko in the Greek. Why did Paul, within the same 2 or 3 verses, we see the word know? Why does it oida here and gnosko here? And yet I see it as no. Point I'm trying to get here is, I had a resource that I had a tremendous amount of confidence in, the Bible, and I had a conviction that if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God and he will give it to him. So I took those things at face value. When you all sit down to write fantasy, and when I start listening to the guy yesterday, I appreciate his painting a picture for me of how God brought things into existence, his creativity, et cetera, et cetera. I don't anticipate I can ever have his creativity unless he gives it to me. And if he gives it to me, how, if I don't have the scripture in front of me, how do I really know? If I'm Shimrit, and Shimrit's the only, she's got a great victory in her life. She doesn't really look at it this way, but she's the only author in the history of authorship who's gotten me to read fantasy. And I very much enjoyed it. I mean, but all the while I'm reading this and I'm loving her characters and Terra Colony and, but I'm thinking, how did she do this? And to Craig's comment, or Krim's, I think, the whole time of this discussion this morning, most of us guys are pretty quiet. And I'm just marveling at the evidence. How anybody can think that there's not a difference between men and women is beyond me. Because the freedom that you ladies have, and of course I see my wife in front of me when I'm saying this, and the I don't know, the gentleness and the unassumingness and the it's just, and so this stuff flows out of you. So to get to my question for you fiction writers, who I have no doubt at all with any of you, you're not influenced by the Lord, and you're not, it's what you do, you're doing with him and his impetus. How are you able to confirm that a character you've created, or the profile of this person you've created, or the conversation that 3 of your people have just had, how do you know the Lord is in that? Or what do you hold yourself accountable to regarding God's involvement in what you're doing? It was easy for me. Get my point? It was easy for me. I could look at the words. You guys don't have the scripture. Your writing isn't about scripture per se, although you can subtly weave it in. And Shimrit certainly did that in many places. Didn't have to quote the verse, but I could hear it in what she wrote. How do you know? How do you do that? How do you hold yourselves accountable to confirm that he is in what you're doing?
Maury, Shimrit did exactly to you what everyone here does to me. It's the same thing. They feed me. That's what got you started.
You're right.
Maury, do you know the song, It's About the Climb?
It's about the what?
It's the climb. Do you know that song, It's the Climb?
I'm sorry, I don't.
I'm not going to sing it for you because I'm telling you, I'm not good. But anyway, it's the climb. And to me, when you're talking about what Shimri's writing, or I'm writing, or you're writing, yes, you're writing about that subject matter, but it's what bleeds through in the work is it's the climb, it's your process. Not many people I know, like probably nobody, has taken the kind of time and totally changed their life for this commitment that you have within you. And that to me is what shows through, and that's the creativity there. So yes, you're working off of a nonfiction format in a sense, but it's about how you create that. I mean, that's what I think shows through in your work. And like it does for all of it, it's just a different genre. So yeah, that's my theory.
Yeah, and you have a unique voice. There are other people who have written about scripture, Maury, and if I opened up their book and your book, yours is going to sound different because of the voice God created in you to bring those words to life. So you have a creativity, even though you're basing it on nonfiction. For me, if I just can't get a scene to work, then I'm going in the wrong direction. I'm not where God wants me to be. I'm not telling the story he wants me to tell because I just can't get it to come together. And so, and this annoys people too, I can write in more than one book at a time. If I'm stuck on one book, I'll jump to another one and completely, I can go from women's fiction to fantasy to historical fiction. I have like 7 different whips open at the same time, works in progress. It's crazy. My brain is weird. But I'll go on to a different story and I'll work on that for a while. And that, when it flows, when it comes easy, when the story just almost writes itself and there's just sheer joy in watching it come together, I know God's put his stamp on it. When it's a fight, when it's not working out, when I can't make it come together, when it doesn't make sense, when there feels like there's a hole, it's not what God wants at that time. So I've got to figure out where it's supposed to go, and it's not, and I'm not on that path yet. So that's kind of it's more intuitive, if that's the right word for it, than,
Have any of you seen the movie The Man Who Invented Christmas, about Dickens' process in writing A Christmas Carol? Has anybody seen that?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Oh.
Rent it or buy it or whatever. It's the closest that I've ever seen, quite frankly, Maury, to, and everybody else, to how you weave that writing. The characters are people standing in his office. They're arguing with him. Scrooge comes to him at night. He bothers him. This is what happens to me. And then finally, he gets to a breaking point because he can't get it together. And he realizes that he also is weaving his own issues into it. It's a really great movie a friend of mine gave it to me, and they said, "Oh, you're a writer, you'll like this." And I thought, yeah, but I mean, really, it is good as far as the concept of creativity. The Man Who Invented Christmas is the name of it.
You know, Maury, I wrote quite a bit of nonfiction before I started writing this fiction that I just finished. And I used to say the same thing, I read fiction and I'm like, how do they do this? I mean, I don't even know. My brain couldn't go there, but I had this burning desire to write this story about this old woman. It's super simple. It's not near as complicated as so many of you might be, but it just is a character-driven story about this woman and her few people around her. And as I'm writing her and some of the struggles or anxieties she faces, and especially in the third book where she has a huge decision to make, I find myself writing in like little prayers that she says, because she is a Christian woman. It doesn't say that, but people would gather that. And like, I think, well, sometimes I think, well, what would I pray at that moment? I'm not her age, but what would somebody I know who is maybe say at that moment, or what would I say? And I just put it in italics and, write out what she says to God at that moment. Like even just saying, what at one point she was asking him to give her the right words and to open the hearts of those who were going to hear her, and she needed to talk to her family. And that's my way of working it in, at least at this point, because that's the only fiction I've ever done. And I just threw in, I just threw in little prayers here and there that she said in her head, herself quietly in her solitude. And that was my way of bringing in God into her life and into the picture, the whole picture of the thing. That's just how it happened. I didn't exactly plan it, but because I really didn't know. But that's how it happened in that case.
Joe, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I'm a lot like Maury. There's so much there. You just keep digging and digging and digging. I think, for example, he mentioned some of the Greek terminology. Why did Paul say this, and why did he use that word? And in a way, that's kind of, I guess, that's our own creativity, except instead of coming up with our things in our mind, what we're doing is we're just going deeper and deeper into what is nonfiction, I guess you could say. So it's our own type of creativity. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but I think it is creative, even though it's nonfiction.
Well, it's time for us to close. So unless there's something really burning at this moment, Michelle, you're excused if you have to go.
Thank
you. If there's something burning at the moment, otherwise I'll just stop the recording and say bye.
All right.
Bye,
It was
everybody.
great.
Thanks.
Yeah,
See
bye. Have a great week.
Bye, everyone.
Adios.
Bye.
That was really good.